Hello, everyone. This is Andy Schmidt, host of the Orthodoxy podcast. Just wanted to hop on here real quick before this interview to tell you about something that we are just launching today. That is the Paradox Press. The Paradox Press is a Christian conservative news, online news publication or magazine publication that we have been working on for a year. A business partner of mine and myself have been working on for over a year. We have some of the best writers in the world working with us on essays and articles. People like Dr. Dale Ahlquist, who's a world-leading expert on G.K. Chesterton, Dr. Mary Talley Bowden, Dr. Keith Campbell, Dr. Jared Compton, Dr. David Devil. I could go on and on and on. We've got wonderful writers writing for us, and it's a free publication right now. So go over there to theparadoxpress.com. Take a look around at what we have on the About page. It'll explain everything about the publication, what we're doing, who we are, and what the goal is for the first 10 weeks of the publication. But we spent a year on this, and we're excited to show you guys what we've created over at theparadoxpress.com. So go over there, take a look around. You don't have to pay for anything. There's no subscriptions. There's just some free content on there that is very interesting, and that is from some of the best writers, and will be over the next 10 weeks from the best writers that we could possibly find. And so go over to theparadoxpress.com, take a look around, and sign up. I'm here with Dr. Guoqi from the University of Hong Kong. You're a historian, went to Harvard, wrote this wonderful book called The Idea of China, A Contested History. And I thought it would be interesting to do an interview to talk about the history of China, what China is, what their heritage is, what their culture is. There's so many questions that I have about China because I grew up kind of with the idea that the United States is the world superpower. Nobody can touch us. Nobody's ever going to grow big enough to compete against us. And of course, now I'm 26 years old, and China seems to be like a global competitor to the United States. And it seems like it's about time Westerners learn a little bit more about what China is, who the Chinese people are, where they come from, and what their culture is, what they believe. I mean, these are all important questions. So all that to say, let's just start with some of the basic questions. I mean, I imagine there are a lot of books that have been written about the history of China. So why did you feel compelled to write this book?
Okay. Thank you so much, Andy. I will be so glad to talk to you today about the idea of China, a contested history. So the reason I want to write this book, actually it took me 10 years, by the way, to finish writing this book. My editor at Harvard approached me in 2011, exploring the idea of this book. Then took me 5 years to say yes. So I signed the contract with the Harvard University Press in 2016. So that took me another 5 years to finish it. So then I finished the draft of this book in 2020. So then I don't think I need to think about it, to revise it. Then I did not submit the final manuscript to press until 2024. It's a take forever to finish. So it's a very serious book. The reason I decided to write, because everybody talk about China, including Chinese, right? About the idea of China, but nobody really know exactly what do you mean by China or by Chineseness, right?
Yes.
Just like a time. Everybody say we know time, but if we push harder, then to explain. So also just like air, nobody talk about give a credit to the importance of air, but without air, we're going to die, right? That's basically, I think, the idea of China is crucial. As you correctly point out, China, after all, is a rising power. It's a sort of a superpower. Have a basically quite stormy relationship with the United States. So I think basically, especially now when we think about, given the importance of China in the world, economically, diplomatically, politically, it's a time for somebody write a book about that idea of China from ancient time to this moment. So this book obviously covered the history of 3,000 years from Confucius to this moment. I literally explain how China become China, how Chinese become Chinese. So that basically, I think, is a crucial for anybody, for historians, for students, for businessmen, diplomats, politicians. Somehow we all have to figure out what is idea of China, because after all, given the importance of that country, the people, the civilization. So that's why, because so far, by the way, all the books you can come, because there's so many books talk about so-called idea of China. There are no book as thorough as I have done to discuss the idea of China from so-called transnational history and shared history perspective, because I literally say, put the China or the nation in the background of world, global settings, also from shared history. Because idea of China, by the way, not only was decided by Chinese, because it also came from foreigners, especially from the United States. By the way, this year is a 25th anniversary of American independence. Andy, let me tell you a story about how the idea of China becomes shared, even from American side. Because remember, 250 years ago, United States did not exist. It's a colony of Great British Empire, right? The one reason for America or future American decide to become independent have something to do with China. Remember, by the way, the East Indian Company had a monopoly of China trade. But China, by the way, at that time was a big market in the world. I will go to that topic later. So I'm pretty sure you know, in 1764, the Bostonians dropped the tons of cheese from China, by the way, to the Atlantic to protest the British tax, because everybody drink tea, but tea, by the way, from China, right? Then Americans, of course, your guys basically have a blood as a merchant, as a business person. You would like to have access to China market, because it's a very lucrative market. Because when Great Britain control the China market, of course, America or future Americans was not happy. That's why basically when United States become independent, they immediately send the ship to China called Empress of China. In 1784, actually the profit margin was at 25 to 30%. They just tell you how basically the idea of China motivate future Americans to become independent, try to cash in as an independent nation in China market. So basically, even you can say the idea of China have something to do with the American independence, including the tea market, the tea trade, access to China. Also give you another example, by the way, the one of founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, even wonder with a new established the United States, because at that time you have no idea what kind of country you're going to have, right? Remember Benjamin Franklin told American woman, not American woman, a woman in Philadelphia after 1787, say what, after the making of American Constitution, he asked Benjamin Franklin, said, Doctor, what country we got? Franklin said, a republic, if you can keep it. Right. So anyway, Benjamin Franklin, one of founding fathers, he wondered the future of the United States might have to learn from China, because China, by the way, the image of China or idea of China was positive, because with a Confucian civilization, with a so-called merit-based civil service examination. Also, I don't know whether or not you noticed when Donald Trump recently visited China, he gave a history lesson to the Chinese host, Xi Jinping, talk about how Confucius statues end up on the front door of Supreme Court, because Benjamin Franklin thought the future of the United States need to learn from a so-called civilized China. So anyway, I think that's basically, when you talk about idea of China, it's a very contested, very complicated. Chinese and non-Chinese contributed to the idea of China. Give you another.
That is fascinating. I didn't. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay,
no, go ahead.
Just give you, since you are in US, I'm in Asia, also in the celebration mood of Americans' independence for 250, because after United States become independent with some possible impact from China, right? With the Express of China arrived in Canton in 1784. Then actually that long shared history between Chinese and Americans emerged. For example, George Washington, the first president of the United States, thought Chinese were white until somebody tell him, well, no, they were not white. So Washington was surprised. They think, given how smart Chinese was, right? Of course, that's a little bit racist, but that just so. Then during the American Civil War, the only country in the world support the Lincoln's administration in fighting the South was Chinese. By the way, you were surprised to learn.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm just shocked to hear these things. Yeah.
Yeah, the sound quality not good from you. But anyway, let me elaborate a little bit further. Because in 1861, when American Civil War just broke out, the Chinese government, the Chen court, finally allowed the foreign diplomat reside in Beijing. So that means Anson Burlingame, he was, by the way, American hero. Before the Civil War, Anson Burlingame, he was chosen to be America's top diplomat in Beijing. He arrived in 1862 from Hong Kong. It took him 6 months, right? Because at that time, United States did not have a fixed policy in China. Also, United States, obviously, was not big fan of Great Britain, an old imperialist powers in Europe, right? So, Burlingame, by the way, he graduated from Harvard Law School. He was a distinguished lawyer before he became congressman in Washington, D.C. He was a big fan of American values, of civilizations. He also quite frequently spoke on China to fight against the British, the French, the Russian imperialist policy in China. So that basically, he have a very close friendship with the Chinese top officials. So when he asked Chinese Chen court to stop a South levy by name of Alabama, the ship name, military levy ship manufactured or built by British side, by the way. They did enormous damage to the northern states. So when Burlingame heard the rumor, this navy might arrive on Chinese shore, he asked Chinese government to stop that. Chinese government just listened, issued that decree to the local government, say, when you see this navy ship from south of the rebellion south of the United States, stop it. So American government was deeply grateful.
Really?
Mark Twain, by the way, at that time was a reporter. He said, we have to be grateful to China because that's the only country in the world who support us during American Civil War. Then, of course,
wow.
Burlingame, eventually, to make a long story short, he spent 7 years in China. From 1861, in 1868, he decided to return to the United States. Chinese made him a fascinating offer. You will be surprised. Say, Chinese government asked him, say, Mr. Burlingame, can you represent us to the world as our diplomat? That's literally, Burlingame said yes. So that's basically the first Chinese diplomatic mission abroad was headed by top diplomat from United States, Anson Burlingame. On that capacity, he visited the United States, signed a treaty on behalf of China, literally or divinely called Burlingame Treaty in 1868. So he became a wonderful spokesperson to talk about idea of China, that basically the friendly, the peace-loving nation on the earth. He asked United States, later on asked Great Britain, asked France, or future Germany, to treat China better. He literally thinks through his explanation, the idea of China was benign, was a friendly. He asked the whole world to treat China. So that's brilliant. Just imagine the first head of Chinese top diplomat was American. Brilliant. He, by the way, makes the story even more shocking to you. As a head of a Chinese first diplomatic mission, his mission arrived in Russia. He died as a Chinese top diplomat in Russia in early 1870, literally as a Chinese emperor's messenger at age 49. So when the news of his death arrived in China, Chen Court gave his family a large sum of financial reward, then paid to bring his body to Massachusetts. So next time, if you go to Boston, from Harvard Square, you walk about half an hour, you reach Mount Auburn Cemetery. Burlingame and his family was buried there with Chinese money. Then, of course, just fast forward to this century, China, of course, for 2,000 or 3,000 years was an imperial system, right? Then you return to your question about how globalization affects China. So in late 19th century, when China was defeated first by Great Britain at Opium Wars, then France, then finally defeated by Japan, the westernized Asian country, Chinese realized they have to change. The old China, the old idea of China did not work. They decide to take strong medicine, decide to follow the footprint of the United States and other Western nations. To make a long story short, in 1912, China became a republic, the first republic in Asia, literally by following the footprints of the United States and France. That's basically so.
So there's a lot. Yeah, no, I want to get into the globalization thing here in a minute because that's fascinating to me. One, I have to say there's a lot here that they didn't teach me in history class growing up because I had no idea that the United States and China had this sort of relationship throughout the history of the United States and that the founding fathers. I mean,
very close, basically. Let me just give you a quick overview of U.S.-China relations from the shared history perspective to articulate the idea of China from American side, right? I give you sort of, less than 5 minutes, give you some overview from American independence to the 1912, the first when China became first republic. By the way, Sun Yat-sen, the founding father of Republican China, was American citizen. When he found out the news of a rebellion in China in 1911, he was literally in Denver, Colorado, raising money for revolutionary causes. When he read the news, the rebellion took place, he rushed back to China, became the head of, becomes the first president of the Republic of China, but we know he had American citizenship. He never hid for that because he needs American citizenship to protect him as a revolutionary figure. So you can say when China became republic, United States was the first country in the world, Western country, recognized Republic of China, because Great Britain, the European powers refused because they tried to squeeze unequal right from China. Because remember, in 19th century, the old European powers treat China unfairly, right? Just bullied China. So they want to maintain that unequal right in China before they recognize the new regime. But the reason for the Chinese at that time, they want to have a brand new idea of China, to join the West as an equal member in the family of nations by following American model, by following American Western world order. But of course, the most of European countries say no, say we do not treat you as an equal. we still try, you're supposed still to recognize us as superior, right? So that idea of China, articulated by Sun Yat-sen, by New Chinese, clashed with old European powers because they still treat China as old China. So you can say in 20th century, Chinese literally say bye-bye or farewell to the old idea of China. China was not civilization anymore. China want to become nation state. China abolished Confucian civilization, abolished civil service examination. They basically try to be reborn anew, a new idea of China. But that's, by the way, that's early. So you can say the idea of China before 19th century was old one, based on civilization or traditional civilization. The Chinese did not want to join the rest of the world as an equal member because they think they were superior as a civilization, right? But after they were bullied by European powers, later on Japan, they figured they need a brand new idea of China based on Western ideas. So that's why from 1912 till 1949, the Chinese was desperate because they tried to develop a new idea of China to save the sinking nation in the very hostile international world order. Because, between 1914 and 1919, the First World War took place. The Chinese, by the way, literally followed the footprint of the American government to declare war on Germany in 1917. The American delegation and Chinese delegation at Paris Peace Conference in 1919 was very close. The president of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, was treated as a god in China. The Chinese basically students frequently marched to the legation of American legation in Beijing to shout slogan, "Long live Woodrow Wilson." Just because Woodrow Wilson basically at that time, I don't know how well you know American history, literally tried to create a brand new world order with a new political system. Freedom, so-called national self-determination, the open diplomacy. The Chinese loved that idea. Then, of course, Chinese top diplomats. By the way, one of them got a PhD in international law from Columbia University in 1912. Then he returned to China to work for Republican China. Then in 1915, at the age of 28, he was sent to Washington, D.C. as the youngest top diplomat from China, or anywhere in the world. He was the youngest minister. But by that time, of course, minister is just like a sort of an equivalent ambassador, since China and U.S. did not have an ambassador level of diplomatic relationship. That's top diplomat. So this guy by name Winston Koo, he was very versed with American international law, with international world order, with Chinese ambition to have a new idea of China. He basically frequently consulted with Woodrow Wilson, with the American delegation, to tell Americans what kind of idea of China they want, they prefer, they would. So to make a long story short, Woodrow Wilson was manipulated by old European diplomats. He eventually decided to betray China by signing the Versailles Treaty. By the way, just give you the very vivid image on my mind. On June 28th, 1919, when the two chairs reserved for Chinese diplomats to sign the Versailles Treaty, American government signed the treaty. The Chinese refused to put the signature on the Versailles Treaty because they say the whole system was unfair. We tried so hard to create the brand new idea of China to join you guys. You still use the old imperialist rope to tighten Chinese lap. So unfortunately, Woodrow Wilson, in order to sell his ideas of world to old Europeanists, by signing that by compromise with Japan, with Great Britain and others, the American Congress vetoed that Versailles Treaty. Then basically make a long story. The Chinese Americans did not sign or approve the Versailles Treaty. With a wrong, because American Congress literally say Woodrow Wilson betrayed China, betrayed the idea of China. Chinese say, I don't like the Versailles Treaty. So that's again, even as, so that's First World War, the Chinese and Americans were very close ally in every way, especially in the shared vision of New World Order somehow. But then make a long story short, in the Second World War, you know this story very well. The Chinese Americans fought the same enemy, shared same ideas of New World Order, even idea of China. But guess who? In the middle, when Chinese was still in the middle of fighting Japanese, say in 1943, your president of the United States, FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, persuade Winston Churchill, persuade Joseph Stalin, even persuade Chinese leader Chiang Kai-shek, say after Second World War, the 4 policemen were served world orders, world leaders to maintain the world peace, which these 4 policemen, the United States, Great Britain, Soviet Union, and China. That, by the way, that idea of China as a new leader of the world after Second World War, of course, it's a very important part of new idea of China, right? That Chinese try to achieve since it became republic. It's from United States. Of course, Winston Churchill refused.
Did they change? Because France, if I'm remembering this correctly, the Nuremberg trials sort of attempted to implement that new world order in some sense. And so you had the United States, England, France, and was it the Soviet Union who brought together?
Andy,
am I correct on this? So they
Andy, the picture, the history was so funny. What happened to France, by the way? France was literally under German control since 1940. So both Winston Churchill and FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, did not think France was a major important power after Second World War because France did not get into serious fighting against Nazi Germany. So only after 1945, after Second World War was over, somehow France returned as a number 5. But for number 4, no France. China, United States, UK, USSR, right? So that's again, so that's why basically China became a member of permanent Security Council in the United Nations simply because that status China as a big 4, right? So if that's a part of our idea of
Wait, can I ask? Let me ask. Yes. No. Let me just. That's fascinating, and I just want to real quick. Can we create the dichotomy though between the old China and the new China? Because what you're discussing in the new China is very interesting, and I want to get to more of the globalization question. But I think that it's important to set this up by painting the picture of the old China, the old civilization, the traditions, Confucianism. Like, what was China, or who was China prior to the 1900s?
Excellent question, because. By the way, China until 18th century was dominant, was undisputed superpower in every category, economically, militarily, high tech, or culture. Because China, of course, by the way, it's the only civilization in the world which continues. Because starting from ancient time to still today, so it's was a big country. If you read, by the way, the Rise and Fall of Great Powers by Paul Kennedy, that book was published in 1980s. If you believe the argument in that book, by 18th century, Chinese economy contribute to more than 1/3 of world economy. Was basically even basically United States right now maybe less than 30%, about 25 or something. But China from Asian, give you another example. between 1405 and 1433, half a century before Columbus, the three boat, which so-called argument of discovery of America, Chinese sent 7 fleets to the world. To actually, the 7th fleet that could carry, it's a very high tech. It's a Chinese fleet was very advanced, very high tech. According to a very famous or distinguished historian of Harvard, John Kim Fairbank, in his last book called China: A New History, he basically wrote, if the Chinese want to colonize the world in early 15th century, no country can resist it because China was so high power, so advanced in every way. By the way, the Chinese have a first paper currency. 1,000 years ago, the Chinese developed the civil service examination based on merit-based system 1,000 years ago. So that's old China. So that's why Chinese was self-confident. They're very arrogant. They think if you want, they did not need anything from the other countries, so-called barbarians, right? So when Great Britain came to China, they treated us equally, economically or diplomatically. The Chinese emperor, by the way, he died the same year as George Washington in 1799. Simply tells the Great British, go away, we don't need you. We are too powerful, too great to be equal as you. We are too rich to need anything from you. That's old China. The idea of China before 18th century, before 19th century, before arrival of Westerns, China was very confident nation. They think.
So what happened? What happened when the West arrived to? When did it begin to decline? I suppose I don't know if that's the right language. I don't know if it ever began to decline seriously, because I guess you tell me what happened when the Westerners arrived to affect.
That's excellent question.
How China? Yeah, go ahead.
So so I mentioned basically that the one background for which motivated future Americans to become independent, because everybody was obsessed with so-called the Great China, the country which was civilized, which rich, which basically very attractive to everyone, right? So Marco Polo, by the way, he was in China. He was an Italian merchant. He was in China. He wrote a very famous book called that book about his time, his observations of China, in China, motivate Columbus to try to figure out the way to China, to benefit, to have access to, right? Then, of course, not only Columbus, he eventually arrived in U.S., America by mistake in 1492. Every Europeans at that nation at that time was desperate, trying to find the road to China. Then eventually in 15th century, they succeeded. So when the Western came, so at that time, China was the reason why the European country desperate, because China was a very important part of the world system, the center of world trade, world system. For example, Silk Road, the Chinese have basically good like silk, tea, porcelains were very, very attractive to the Westerners. Eventually, the tea became an item we discussed earlier, right? So they want to have access to benefit from this, but until 16th century was not successful, right? But then, of course, Chinese still lived in old dream. They did not realize the rise of West. They benefit from geographic discovery, industrial revolution. Also, they are basically motivated by market and colonies. They play different game. The Chinese, by the way, it's an agriculture-based economy. They were not merchants-based. They did not want to go to abroad to colonize everybody, right? So then, of course, when Chinese, by the way, invented the compass, which of course very important for the sea going, right? Chinese invented gunpowder, right? The Chinese invented the paper making, right? All of this were very important, but they decided not to take advantage of it. But Westerners eventually take by building very powerful boat, strong guns. Then they played the barbarians game with Chinese because Chinese did not what they think they are very superior in moral values. They did not get involved in this so-called animal style fighting. They just kill each other, especially like the Westerners did in the First World War, right? So then they fell behind when.
Is that? Can I ask real quick? Can I ask what was that though? Was that the Confucian philosophy that was sort of undergirding the Chinese people compared to whatever the Westerners? I mean, Westerners are like entrepreneurial in certain ways. There's expansion, there's growth, and you're saying that the Chinese people weren't really interested in a lot of that. What is that?
Chinese actually benefited or suffered from Confucian culture. That's of course Confucian culture, by the way, were dominant ideology for China or for old idea of China for 2,000 years.
Yes.
From basically the first century BC and AD till 1905 when Confucian ideas was abolished, when civil service examination was abolished. Then the Chinese were determined to learn. So let me give you very quickly a very simple idea of Confucianism. Confucian ideas focus on moral values. Just give you maybe do you play Weiqi or Go or Chinese? The Chinese mind game or Weiqi or Go, that two white stones or black stones, the mind game, they have a different strategic idea for the top. The best so-called, the Chinese, by the way, the Asian Chinese have a different idea of a victory or success. For example, in terms of fighting,
really?
the best strategy of victory was your enemy do not dare to fight against you. Without fighting, you subdued. So right, the Confucian ideas emphasize that value, so-called soft power, to use say you are too attractive to others, people don't dare to challenge you. But again, the British Empire did not play that game. They did that to Americans. They did because they just brutal the war, right? You either obey us or we destroy you. The Chinese never basically after they enjoyed the peace and prosperity for many centuries, they did not build up on their so-called modern type weapons, the boat. So when during the Opium War, by the way, that's basically the first taste of Western imperialism. Opium War was illegal in China. Opium was illegal in China, even illegal in Great Britain. But in order to sell to buy Chinese good, they decide to smuggle the opium, the illegal drug. Then Chinese become addicted. The Chinese court, the government decide to ban this. The British say, no, you cannot ban it. In the name of free trade, they send the military force to China. The Chinese were not prepared for this, right? Also, by the way, at that time, China had an emperor. They did not care about so-called national sovereignty, so they just did it. But after many wars lost at the Western hand, especially at the westernized Japan, the Chinese realized the old idea of China did not work. They paid price. They have to become industrialized. They have to become commercialized. They have to join the rest of the world as a member.
They have to become liberalized. Yeah, they have to become liberalized. I mean, that was the thing that seemed to be what the West was pushing. This is the question that I have, though, is that it seems to be the case that for a lot of different countries, the 1900s and even the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution, moving into the world wars and what happened in the 1900s, this was like a historical pivot point for many different countries. And we talk about globalization and liberalization and industrialization all happening in the 1900s and the late 1800s as well. Now we're into the 20th century, 21st century, and China, the United States. I think you wrote about this in your book. Like Chinese birth rates have fallen. In the United States, the death rates are higher than the birth rates, and I just can't imagine that the birth rates would have fallen to where they're at in China and even in the United States prior to industrialization and globalization and liberalization. And so the question that I have for you is like, yes, there were probably some economic perks and certain geopolitical perks to becoming the new China, but in some sense, like, didn't globalization, isn't it sort of not working out as far as like continuing a civilization when you're not having babies, when a civilization isn't having enough children to repopulate? What does that do to you? I mean, that's happening to America too. It's happening everywhere. I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
You mean the impact of globalization on China, on the United States, or is that your question?
Just in general. Yeah, just in general, like we talk a lot about globalization and that there were new rules sort of for global relations in the 1900s, post World Wars.
Yeah,
there had to have been a new consensus.
One thing, by the way, the reason to go back a little bit earlier to your first question, why I decided to write this book, because the Chinese don't develop their actually the good understanding of that history. So Americans, because China, by the way, with maybe just with us 200 years in basically 18th century, 19th century, was a very important part or driving force of globalization from Asian time till it. Really? Just give you one Silk Road, right? Well, last thing in after the so-called Columbus exchange, when Columbus came to America, they colonized Latin American nations with one very unique item Chinese like, the silver dollars. So basically, so even before the arrival of Western, China was a very important part of driving forces of world order, with a Silk Road, with basically, for example, Marco Polo came to China, in town China about more than 1,000 years ago. The Japanese monks, the Japanese student, the Korean student, they all came to China to study, to learn, to live it. That's why they brought. So after 15th century, because the Chinese obsessed with silver dollars, the rest of the world obsession with the Chinese gold, silk, tea, porcelains, that makes China at the driving force of globalization. So Chinese was only fell behind in 19th century, because then when they were frustrated to deal with the rise of the West. So then, of course, after that, Chinese were desperate. They tried to become one of Western countries, right? By joining the West, remember that democracy, that socialism, communism, all these ideas came from West. So before 1919, you mentioned the May 4th movement, the Chinese tried to join the liberal West as an equal member, right? After 1919, then Chinese concluded the Western country could never treat China as an equal member. Then guess what happened? They turned to Russia. Socialism, because the Soviet Union basically created a brand new political system. So Chinese said, forget about West, forget about Confucian culture, China. Let's turn to socialism. Socialism, Andy, is a radical idea from West, right? It's a Karl Marx idea. It's a German guy. So the Chinese at this time just literally desperate. They try, because after enjoy so many centuries, peace and prosperity and stability, then they were forced to deal with the West. The West did not treat China very well. That's why they tried to desperate. Then, of course, the Chinese, by the way, eventually split with the Soviet Union. Remember, in 1960s, China was enemy of two superpowers, the United States and USSR. Just tell you, they were frustrated with both. Then now, of course, after death of Chairman Mao, when Deng Xiaoping came to power as a paramount leader, again, he was convinced China have to learn from the West, have to open up to the West. We have to basically to join that globalization wagon. We join basically to catch up with everybody, right? So that's why in 1980s, I, by the way, benefit from this open door or reform policy. I was allowed to go to US to learn history, right? So the reason I could write this book to tell the Chinese and Western readers about idea of China, myself is a benefit of this globalization in terms of good, not only but that's
true,
right?
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. So what is China now? Because it sounds like what you're saying, and I think I agree with it, that the United States and the West in general played a major role in basically just pushing the Chinese out in the 1900s. Yeah. And then they got frustrated with America and with the West. Okay. And so what are they now?
Yeah, I think that as I mentioned, I hopefully I convey my argument to you earlier, because the idea of China in the past resulted from the shared journey, shared visions from both Chinese and non-Chinese. Remember, without opium wars, without Western imperialism, the Chinese might never give up their culture China, the traditional idea of China, right? Until then, of course, after they were convinced, without change, without new idea of China, China or Chinese as a nation will be destroyed by Western countries, by Westernized Japan, right?
Right.
So that's why China, from 1912 to 1919, in 1 decade, they tried desperate to become basically the follower or become a member of family of nations under the world order of the Western countries. But then, of course, as I mentioned, they did not work. Then they turned to Soviet Union, to the socialism. So now, basically, I don't think the Chinese at that time, because they were so desperate, so frustrated, they just pick one option from another one, from democracy, from communism or nationalism to socialism. Now, by the way, China, after that, you can have to give credit to Chinese, with over less than 50 years period, they become very powerful economically, diplomatically, right, in every sense. But Chinese, but again, the future idea of China are not solely on the Chinese choice, also depends on the other countries' options. For example, I always argue, if you treat, for example, if the United States treat China as an enemy, you are guaranteed to get the enemy, right? If you treat China as a friend or potential friend, you might get friend, you might, but the Chinese, by the way, you will see, very few people even realize, have a long shared history between Chinese Americans. They basically give you another example. For 2 world wars, the Chinese Americans were fighting the same enemies, were fighting for same ideas, right? Even at the Cold War, by the way, Richard Nixon, even you are so young, you heard about Richard Nixon. He
was the first one to go to China.
Exactly. In 1969,
to China.
He would like to have a better relations with Beijing. Reason, because not say he was friendly to China, because to have a better relations with China serve Americans' national interest fundamentally. For example, that Nixon literally tried to play China card to deal with Soviet Union, to force Soviet Union to return to negotiation tables with United States, because Soviet Union thought they were, or last thing, by playing China card, have a better relations, United States can withdraw from Vietnam. Remember that bloody Vietnam War, you were losing. Richard Nixon simply promised to to Americans, maybe your father's generation, I will withdraw from Vietnam with honor. How you withdraw from Vietnam with honor? You need Chairman Mao's blessing, man, right? So with China on the side of the United States during the Cold War, that served American interest fundamentally. That's why basically even United States did not recognize Beijing until 1979, but that honeymoon, the diplomatic honeymoon between Beijing and Washington, D.C. existed 10 years early, from pretty much since the Chairman Mao and Richard Nixon's idea to have better relations with each other as early as 1969. Then until 10 years later, U.S. recognized Beijing. Then basically the honeymoon continues until 1989, when Berlin Wall collapsed. Because during the Cold War, the Chinese and Americans literally were fighting the same enemy, USSR, right? So you can say from First World War, Second World War, Cold War, Americans and Chinese were very close, but very few Americans realized that, right? Even in the American War after September 11th, Chinese were so determined to tell American government, say, on the war against terrorism, we are on the same side. So that's why basically George W. Bush the Jr. was so friendly to China in 2008. By the way, Andy, you will be surprised to learn this if you don't know this before. Our sitting president of the United States never attended the opening ceremony of Olympic Games in other countries. Never. But in 2008, when Beijing was hosting Olympic Games, most of Western countries' head of states arrived in China to attend it, including the sitting president of the United States, George W. Bush the Jr. Also, by the way, the former president of the United States, his father, was in Beijing too. You can see, so that's 2008. So now, of course, the United States was, because you don't have a shared enemy anymore. You need the enemy. You treat China as enemy. But again, as I mentioned,
real quick. I want to ask about that though. I want to ask about the fact that, because I think that's really interesting. Like a lot of this, they don't teach us this in school here in the United States at all. I know nothing about the history of China in the United States. And you would assume growing up in the United States that we've always had bad relations with China. But what you're saying is it's like actually the opposite of that. We've had very good relationship with China. And so
for the long history from,
what's happened since 2008?
Again, as I mentioned, until basically until Obama, of course, U.S.-China relations want ups and downs, but overall, basically, there's a very deep shared friendship of values between Chinese and American. Before, in the Imperial China, I mentioned Anson Burlingame, who represent China to explain the idea of China to the rest of the world, right? In 19th century, then China became first republic in Asia. Then basically Chinese and Americans fought the two world wars on the same side, right? Then during the Cold War, we have a lot of things in common in fighting against Soviet Union. By the way, give you one example. Most Americans did not have, when Jimmy Carter issued a call to the world to boycott Moscow Games in 1980 to protest Russians' invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. The Chinese government was the first country respond to that with a positive yes, saying, yes, we're going to boycott Moscow Games. By the way, Great Britain sent the team to Moscow. Right? So that just tell you, that's not shocking to you? Right? Anyway, so...
Yes. everything you're saying is shocking to me because they never ever said anything about this in public schools and history classes. Like I just
because
never.
You have to educate Americans because when the talking heads, the politicians, for their selfish purpose, they just try to get the vote or to get the attention. But if you forget history, you get basically you're going. Of course, that's a cliche. History you could repeat history, right? So remember. Yes. The U.S.-China relations, it's a very complicated, but with a lot of positive things there. So now, I think for Americans, you think you don't benefit from globalization, the Chinese. But Andy, you are too young to remember that so-called that saying in U.S., the China price. When I was in the United States in 1990s, because the electronic goods made in China was so cheap, that literally help you guys to deal with inflation. Also, every family can afford VCR made from China because so cheap. As a poor student in the United States, I couldn't even afford to buy. By the way, when I arrived in US in 1990, I never saw a computer in my life. But 10 years later, China became factory of the world. Everything now is made in China, including Apple computer, Apple Watch, right? Then you can say that basically when people talk about confrontations, the Cold Wars between U.S., today's China and U.S. can never go back to the zero-sum game which exists between United States and Soviet Union, right? If the Chinese economy suffered, so is the world economy, especially American economy. Right. When we talk about AI competition between Chinese and Americans, remember, Andy, the top AI scholars, experts in US are Chinese.
I know. Well, this all comes down to a lot of domestic politics about manufacturing and it's national security and all these questions. I think that what the confusing thing about all of this is like, okay, every country has their own interest in mind. So obviously China has their own interest in mind. The United States has their own interest in mind, or we should. I don't know if we always have had our own interest in mind, but we should. And when we talk about manufacturing and we talk about some of these things that have been shipped out to China, and China is, everything's made in China. That's sort of the joke in the United States. Everything's made in China. And it's true. Like, how good is that for the United States as far as maintaining some national security? Because China and the United States, as of right now, at least on the headlines, on the news, are enemies. But what is that like? Okay, so if we're like not on the same page, if the United States and China are sort of enemies, or that the politicians are saying that, then isn't it more advantageous for the United States to have manufacturing and data and AI and all of this stuff here in the United States on our own soil? And I think that's where a lot of the questions come into play, because I don't really know what China's goals are. They seem very strategic and they seem very secretive from my perspective, but I'm not looking into this all the time. And so where are we at today in 2026 with the United States relationship with China? And should the West be nervous about manufacturing? Should we be nervous about AI? Like, what should people in the United States be nervous about when it comes to China? Because they're not acting in American interest, they're acting in Chinese interest, as they should. It's their own country. And so I guess, what do you have to say about that?
Again, as a historian, of course, we are very good with the past. But of course, if we don't understand the past, we might don't understand the future, right? So
yes, I agree.
I think basically for both, if you finish this book, I basically in the last part, I mentioned this book is written for both Chinese readers and non-Chinese, because they all have a quite fragmented understanding of the past. Based on what I told you, it seems for us that exists. It's a reality, but nobody talk about this in the past. Because Henry Kissinger, by the way, before his death, he openly acknowledged between in 1970s and early 80s, before the end of Cold War, Americans shared more national secrecy with the Chinese than with Great Britain. because
really
they are fighting the same enemy, Soviet Union, USSR, because Chinese was so determined to fight. Okay, that's why I told you stories. The Chinese was first government to say, we will boycott Moscow game no matter what, right? The British, you can always claim the UK has a special relationship with the United States. They sent delegation to Moscow, right? The Japanese, the Western Germans did not commit themselves until much later, right? Even Americans Olympic Committee, by the way, said no to Jimmy Carter because they were private. Why we athletes train so hard? Then because of you, we lost the opportunity. They refused. But the Chinese, because their deep sense of hatred against the Soviet Union. Remember, come on, Andy. In theory, they're supposed to be socialist countries. They're brothers, right? They just hate each other so much. Yeah. So then again, I think for Americans, the tragic is from historian perspective. It's a tragic. If you basically search for enemy, say that you choose Chinese as your enemy, you get that very powerful, even fatal enemy. Because again, the Chinese were not Soviet Union. Because the one reason, by the way, is the collapse of Soviet Union is largely not because of American success, because they mess up themselves, right? The powerful Soviet Union ceased to exist after 74 years lifespan. The Chinese, basically, their goal was, say, make Chinese rich, stable. Their main focus on is domestic. The Chinese, by the way, they never care. They don't have. I don't think they have an ambition to replace the United States as a world leader. They are not in their interest. They only just want to benefit from this to make Chinese rich, powerful, but don't replace the United States. So that's so ironic. The major champion of globalization or world system built up by Americans after Second World War. Now, basically, the Chinese supported. Your president tried to destroy everything, including NATO, right? Including basically, you even withdraw from World Health Organization, right? That come organizations.
I think there's some. I'll just say I think there's some legitimacy to Trump's desire to pull out of NATO just on the economic. Like, look, I understand the 1900s were tumultuous. So many crazy things happened, but it was true. The United States was basically babysitting all of Europe, and we were paying the vast majority into NATO, and our military was taking care of everybody. And I do think that is.
Yeah, but
I think that it's an important thing to note that like the rest of the countries weren't paying their fair share, and I think that that's a statistical fact. Now, does that mean that you break the entire NATO?
Let me put it this way: as a historian, we don't predict future, but it's a very simple mind game, right? For example, if we say it's the Chinese PRC and the United States get into war. If that's a scenario, right? Imagine now, United States lost the war in Vietnam simply because of the Uncle Ho, Ho Chi Minh, has a different definition of victory. For example, when Americans lost about less than 60,000 lives in Vietnam, the war was over, right? Just again, give you another example. When Putin decided to invade Ukraine, in 2024, he thinks that the war basically going to be over very soon. But now it's the 5th year now. Then, of course...
Right. I think... So this is the domestic versus global question, because from my perspective as a guy who
plays a so-called worst scenario case by bringing history back.
Oh, sure, sure.
Yeah, say, if China and the United States are deadly enemies, they're going to fight. Then history, for example, United States did not defeat Vietnam. You lost.
You're right. You're correct. Yeah, I agree.
Then, of course, Putin, the Russia, supposed to be powerful. Ukraine supposed to be less powerful. But now you say what happened in the war there. Ukraine was not losing. Even Donald Trump tells the Ukraine presidency, you did not have a card. They indeed have a card, right? Now, I'll give you another example is the current one, the war with Iran. Look what happened there. So the point is, I say, if you think the worst scenario between...
Well, tell me, explain, break that down a little bit more with the war with Iran, because I was going to ask you about this, because my understanding is that when the United States went into war with Iran, there was a period of time where they were trying to work out a deal, the United States with Iran, not the most recent time, but about 2.5 months ago. And we couldn't get the deal right until China came in and told Iran, you need to take this deal with the West. Of course, right after that, Israel.
My point is with these 3 examples there, to have a war, by the way, that's the worst scenario between 2 countries. I don't think United States, first of all, even worse scenario, you defeat China, but it's impossible because the definition of victory is changing. So nobody is going to win, right? Especially as both countries are nuclear powers, right? We literally bring to the humanity will return to Stone Age. Right, you say economy, globalization, all end. We return to drawboard, right? So if that's not good work, is a not good scenario for both countries. I think obviously it's good to figure out how to live with each other, coexist, figure out found the shared interest. As I argued, in the past, the Chinese have a shared interest. Shared values, visions with Americans for last, basically since American become independent. So if that's not,
do you feel like Trump is?
So I think that.
Do you feel like Trump has done that? Do you think?
I think that for me.
Sorry. Do you feel like?
Yeah, go ahead. The quality is of some.
Do you feel like Trump has done that because do you feel like Trump has done that? Or not, I guess, tried to find the shared values with China and find common ground, or has he not done that? I don't know. I haven't looked into this very much.
Obviously, I think the messages from both sides are not that friendly, right? Since
right.
But one thing you can say, I think Americans now, the government literally shoot itself at foot, because remember, since I mentioned personally, since 1980s, the Chinese sent a lot of Chinese went to US, to other countries to learn from you. Or many of them even choose to stay in the United States, right? So then now, because that's, I think is a stupid policy from politicians in the United States. Now the Chinese, you literally help the Chinese enjoy the brain gain. In the past, it's literally brain drain, because the best and brightest American Chinese went to your country, right? As I mentioned, the top, they help our United States to become, actually to benefit from their expertise, right? Now, because you are hostility to Chinese, then many of them were forced to return, right? That's basically, you literally say, if that's what you want, just imagine you have a top AI scholars all return to China. By the way, that's not in the American interest, by the way, because the Chinese, again, are very important players in many scientific discoveries in the United States, right? So if you, for example, give you example, the Chinese pay the top dollars, by the way, for their American education. Top dollars. Chinese pay the full tuition everywhere nowadays. Otherwise, the state university in the United States could not survive without the full tuition or the spending, right? Then if you put that way, so that's something I think politicians should be careful. Don't basically say go home Chinese, because many of them are Americans, by the way, right? Also, I think you need basically to, again, that's a lot of shared values, shared interest, shared visions there. But politicians just ignore that. Then, of course, you place the the dirty game, that basically not good for anyone. Because again, as a historian
Do you
of
think
Chinese history, American history, I can guarantee you that people on both sides could become paranoid if you just sensed each other were hostile. Remember, Americans tend to be paranoid frequently, right? During the Vietnam War, during the Cold War era, in the war against in Iraq. When you rush, you make decision. It's the point I try to make. Because I spent many years to study First World War. When you get into war, you have no idea what's going to happen. I mentioned the three recent wars, right? Vietnam War, a war in Ukraine, war with Iran. The First World War is a world-class actually example for politicians should learn. Because remember that Germany was so confident that got into war happily. Then 4 years later, Germany ended up in the terrible situation. Never recovered, by the way. Then because the First War, the Second World War, now it's, right? Russia, the whole family of Russian Tsar family were murdered, right? Ottoman Empire, Turkish Empire, the four powerful empires disappeared, just gone with wind. That's, I think if you ask the Germans to think about that, they will definitely will not go to that direction, right? By the way, Russia, the British front did not benefit from First World War either, even they were victors, because both of them declined dramatically. That, of course, eventually gave way to the rise of the United States. That's actually, as historians, that basically politicians could make mistakes. Population can easily sometimes become overexcited. But again, when you go, so that's why as a historian, as a scholar, I think we always be cautious, learn something from history, learn something. Because again, the Chinese are returned to the question about idea of China. They are still trying to figure out what is idea of China. When you reach the final chapter of this book, I basically try to explain basically the potentials for China, because as I mentioned, China tried to follow the footprint of the United States and France. Basically, at that time, they figured that as in the best interest for them. Then later on, by following the footprint of Russia, they think that's best scenario for them. Now they think maybe they figure out something different, right? Fundamentally different, right? Could be. But that's the key message for this book. The past idea of China was shared history. The future idea of China are going to be shared. What will be decided by both Chinese and non-Chinese, especially the Americans. That's what I think basically, as I mentioned, if you treat China as an enemy, you get an enemy. If you help, because for the United States, they try to change China, try to help China for last 200 years. Now it's up to United States. Because the Chinese and Americans, by the way, share many characters. Non-nonsense, pragmatical. Also, they have a long-term thinking. Right?
Yes.
So
that's a fascinating thing to think about, the pragmatic and sort of utilitarian worldviews of both of the countries and how they're both in alignment there. And that's fascinating to think about. I mean, obviously these aren't things that we've been taught. So I'm learning right now in real time as you're talking with me. And, I guess the main question that I have right now is just, what is it with the United States in our politicians who seem to be dead set on creating an enemy and causing problems? Is it just for the sake of like people get rich during war and media companies, politicians, military industrial complex. I mean, who was it? It wasn't FDR. It was, I can't remember which president warned of the military industrial complex and the desire of
Eisenhower,
the American political class.
Eisenhower.
Eisenhower. Yes.
Remember, he's a general. He was a hero of Second World War.
Yes. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think basically, of course, for politicians in the United States, in order to generate support, the vote, you usually try to play the sensational story ideas because so easy in the white and black rhetoric. See, right? That's easy. Of course, the military complex loves that idea. They always want to have an idea of enemy, right? In order to make profit. So that's why the rational thinking, learn from history, is important. I think basically Americans, and right now, just like Chinese, have a short memory of history because you forgot what happened. Remember, for last 250 years, by the way, for the first 100 years, United States was literally just a country was a one country, two systems, with a slavery, right, in the South, free economy in North. Then you have to fight a bloody war to fix it. But Americans sometimes forgot their own history. That's not that rosy. But when we talk about other countries, they only see the evil part. But again, I think to have for the nation, for the country, for both Chinese Americans, they need to figure out where they come from. Because the Chinese, by the way, in the early 20th century, have a soul searching to ask, what was China? Who were Chinese? What kind of China they want? They went through many stages, right? Because in the one chapter, my book, I talk about China in 20th century have so many teachers. Japan, United States, Russia, briefly Germany. They try to learn from every country. They think because the traditional China, the traditional idea of China did not work. They learn, but now, the teachers were bad. They figure, right? Because they try to learn from the United States. United States treat China very badly at that time, at a certain time, right? They try to copy Russian system. Then they end up as the enemies, right? They try to learn from Japan. That Japan start to invade China, right? Again, so I think now is a crucial, Andy, for all of us. Because you are young, you want to have a kids. I think have a peace and prosperity. I think that's based, by the way, it's supposed to be shared. Because the Chinese, I could guarantee you, are very pragmatical man. That's why when Deng Xiaoping came to power, he realized to be poor is not socialism. To be rich is socialism. So that's why, as a communist leader, he basically tells the Chinese, no matter it doesn't matter it's a white cat and black cat, as long as they catch mouse, they are good cat. Remember how pragmatical it is. Then say to get rich is glorious. Right. That's basically just like American creed. Just get rich, right? Then go abroad to learn from everybody. So they are not the pragmatic. They are very pragmatical. They basically don't hold on. Remember, the Chinese have used Confucian values for 2,000 years. They abolish it overnight. Yes. Just as you mentioned, even some radical even saying, let's burn the classics. Let's get rid of Chinese languages. Let's learn something new, right? That's the Chinese basically. That's why so many Chinese still, the best and brightest, still want to go to United States to learn, to enjoy a good life, right? That's basically, that's shared. Yes. I think the politicians that also called the mega group people in the United States, make America great again. How? You don't try to basically alienate your NATO's, the Western powers or Chinese. They don't make you great again. They make you miserable again, I think, in the long term, right? So that's again,
and going to war. I mean, endless wars. I think that's sort of the neoconservative MAGA idea, which is what's frustrated many people who voted for Trump. Was he promised no new wars, no new wars, no new wars, and now we're in a war with Iran. Now, so there's a lot of to agree with the point that you're making enemies with everybody. That's not like the best that's not the best geopolitical strategy.
Exactly.
And it seems like that's kind of what we're doing.
But we need actually later on, Andy, you will know the humanity have to stick together because we are facing the threat from outer space. We don't know whether or not they have an intelligence somewhere, but we deal with environmental challenges. Also, but what happened with the sun, that affect the weather on Earth, because that's what I learned. If you say the ice age, it's nothing to do with us humans, because something to do outer space. Because Earth, remember, the blue dot in the universe is tiny.
Yes.
So that again, that's why so many rich guys now try to send the astronaut abroad. Out space, right? That's that's a final frontier. I think basically right now, it's as a historian, especially I'm a historian of so-called transnational history and shared history. I spent many years to study war, especially First World War. I also studied sports, by the way, the Olympic Games. Now, basically, the fundamental question now, it's important to everyone, the idea of China. Also, idea of America, by the way.
Yes.
When we talk about idea of America, what is idea of America? That's basically with a soft power, as a world leader, a benign force. Now you don't get that sense of today's America, right?
I agree.
You see?
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah, America. What America is a fascinating question, because America seems, from my understanding, historically, to be not really imperial. Like, we're not trying to expand. I mean, they had a World War II. It took a lot to get the United States involved in World War II. It took Pearl Harbor being bombed for us to join in, and it felt like America was a very go ahead.
That's exactly, because from in 1930s, United States was a deep mode of isolationism. You say we do not want to get involved.
Yes,
that's why. By the way, the Japanese literally bombed your country into the war, right, with the Pearl Harbor. Right. Because that again just tell you something. Right. United States went through bad stages, because when China, by the way, the Chinese was the only country in the world fighting against Japanese as early as 1931. So the Second World War started in Asia 8 years earlier than Europeans' version of Second War, because that started with the Nazi Germans' invasion of Poland in 1939. For the United States, 2 years later, 1941, but the Chinese start to fight against the Japanese in 1931. So at that time, by the way, the Chinese literally fought alone, heroically, because just like Winston Churchill, Chinese just simply refused to surrender. Then, thank God, after 10 years later, after Pearl Harbor, United States figured to support Chinese war fighting spirit are important for the United States, right? So basically, if you think back history, United States was not always that have a moral values. You basically, when Winston Churchill risked his life to beg FDR to support UK, FDR cannot do anything, right?
Yeah.
Then when Nazi Germany, rise of fascism and rise of militarism in Asia, United States tried to hide there, right? Then somehow during the Cold War, you decide to fight war against Vietnam with the argument Vietnam was a communist. It turned out Vietnam was more nationalist than communist, right? Then you decide. So anyway, that's what I, as a historian, we argue.
Yes.
That's
Right.
Americans sometimes tend to idealize the idea of America when you deal with the foreign countries, right?
Yes.
When you really, for people like me, we study both American history. We have a basically, that's not what, as I mentioned, it takes the cold civil war to destroy slavery system, given that basically almost everyone in the world abolish slavery system. United States still stick to that because their political system, right?
Yes.
So again, so basically, every country, of course, if as an Asian Chinese argument, if every country enjoy good peace and prosperity, then it's good for everyone, right? You don't want to have a poor, disordered country somewhere. So I think that's shared. If China and US or other country, India or Japan in the good shape, then the world, so is the world, right? So that's what I argued. Yes. So if the mega folks talk about, say, treat China as enemy, so I will ask you, what you want? What you get? What, right? I basically play the scenario about Vietnam War. So again, even you win, you lose, right? The Chinese,
right? No, I think that approach is a really helpful approach, especially for Americans thinking through our geopolitical position and how we interact with other countries, because Americans, along with being pragmatic, are incredibly ambitious and sometimes full of ourselves. And so we think that we're going to win everything, but we're in a global economy. The world is globalized. And so when one person, quote unquote, wins, everything kind of loses. And I understand, like, that's the point. You could make that point with Iran, the situation with Iran right now that you're making is, we've, of course, like the United States can go in there and we can have a war with Iran. We can cause conflict, and there can be reasons for that. Yeah. And yet the Strait of Hormuz is shut down, and now we're paying $5, $6, $7 a gallon for gas, and it's hurting American citizens here at home. So that even when you win, you lose sometimes. Exactly. So there's a lot of.
I think you need to remind your audience. That's, of course, because I'm a historian, I know this part of history. United States, by the way, in their attitude toward Chinese, they don't have a moral high stand, because the Chinese, by the way, that was first only race in the world was legally discriminated against in the United States by anti-Chinese Chinese Exclusion Act, which American Congress passed in 1882. That act, by the way, literally lasted till 1943, when FDR, President of the United States, have an idea of big 4 policemen. So when the American tried to say, gosh, the Chinese, if we really want to have a historical memory back, they were basically, American government have not officially apologized to Chinese for that terrible treatment of Chinese, because Chinese, of course, were not allowed to go to U.S. to become American citizen. They did not allow average Chinese to go U.S. because even United States as a country of immigrant, but no Chinese. That lasts from 1882 to 1943, man.
Yes.
But then, of course, when the Americans talk about how benign, how friendly, how moral Americans was toward China, that history was not always on their side, right? So that's, again, I think basically both countries need to learn lessons from the past, try to figure out the shit. Because I personally think it's good for both countries to coexist peacefully. Also, history seems proof that could be doable, right?
Yes. I think that anybody thinking reasonably would say that obviously more peace is better, and peace between two countries who have such massive power on the global stage would be beneficial for everybody. Yeah. The question just is, are the politicians actually willing to agree with that? And are they actually willing to try to implement
you guys, by the way, politicians need a vote, right? I don't believe. So that's an advantage you have. Say, Andy, when we talk about this, almost 100 minutes have passed.
Mm-hmm. See? I know. I was going to wrap it up, and I can wrap it up now. Okay. I'm sorry. It's very interesting to me, the history and the relationships between the countries. It's all a brand new world, and it's incredibly interesting. But I will just say, just to wrap it up. First off, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate having this conversation. It's fascinating, and I want Western people, especially younger people like myself, who don't know anything about China, to learn about China. So they should go get the book, The Idea of China, and continue to try to learn, because the reality is China's not getting any, smaller in their global influence. The United States, we're here. And so we have to interact with each other. And so first, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate that. And I hope people just go and get your book and read it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk with you. When we talk about past, it's fascinating to learn something from the past. Then hopefully, we have a better future. That's, of course, I think it's good for everyone. Yeah. We want to have a better future for everyone, right? Mm-hmm. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks for watching this interview on the history of China and the future of China in the United States and the global geopolitical landscape. Just a quick reminder to go on over to the paradoxpress.com, take a look around, put your email in to sign up for newsletters. Everything is free. We've got some of the best writers in the world writing for us. Dr. Dale Ahlquist, Dr. Keith Campbell, Dr. Mary Talley Bowden, Dr. Jared Compton, David Devil. We have so many different wonderful and talented writers and scholars writing for us. Everything is free. Go over to theparadoxpress.com, take a look around, and let us know what you think. Thanks.